Rahm Emanuel famously said, "Never let a crisis go to waste." And for those of us who believe the response to COVID was proof positive of this mantra, we've been further vindicated. It turns out that 2 days before Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced the 2021 election, a confidential government memo indicated the decision to receive the COVID vaccine was split along political party lines, which meant he could do what the British Empire had always done in its heyday: divide and conquer. The memo from the Privy Council office, dated August 13, 2021, entitled Emerging Evidence on COVID-19, said voters who supported the Liberals and NDP were more likely to get a COVID shot than Conservative voters. So it only stands to reason that these same voters, fearing COVID, would also oppose any political party that was all about choice when it came to the COVID vaccines. This memo only came to light June the 8th, when it was obtained through an access to information request. The memo is dated 2 days before Trudeau called for the federal election on August 15, 2021. Unlike the stance he had taken publicly previously when it came to mandatory vaccination for COVID, this time Trudeau announced he was all in and would campaign on a mandatory vaccination policy, which would see unvaccinated Canadians banned from travel, fired from public service jobs, and in many provinces refused entry to places the government deemed non-essential. Places like restaurants, pools, fitness centers, movie theaters, and museums. Basically making Canadians who didn't agree with him social pariahs, unacceptable, like Hillary's deplorables. At the time, he said, "We've seen where conservative backbenchers have referred to some of this government's decisions as tyrannical in terms of how we're creating mandates for vaccination of public servants or vaccination for people on trains or airplanes. Well, the answer to tyranny is to have an election." Trudeau added that those who disagree with the direction the government was taking should have an opportunity to make themselves heard. That's what this election is all about. It's allowing Canadians to weigh in. However, when he made this statement, he knew full well, now according to this memo, that the fear Canadians had surrounding COVID had led a majority of them to believe that not only were COVID vaccines the magic bullet in fighting COVID, but needed to be mandated to save grandma and grandpa from themselves and others. The memo stated that the most common factors positively associated with intention to vaccinate were male gender, older age, higher education, adequate knowledge or health literacy, trust in experts in government, history of a prior influenza vaccine, higher socioeconomic status, and heightened worry or concern about COVID-19. Now, the older part makes sense. As you get closer to death's door, the less excited you are about knocking on it. Higher education? Well, it makes people fairly egotistical, which meant they thought they knew better and were smarter than the science deniers in opposition to the vaccines. And of course, based on their previous experiences with vaccines, these folks automatically trusted the new ones. However, for folks who thought of themselves as knowledgeable and smart, it's odd to me they didn't question why it took on average 20 years of testing and refining to get previous vaccines right, while the new mRNA ones only did it in about a year. The memo goes on to say, partisanship was associated with intention to vaccinate. Those who voted Liberal, Democrat expressed intention to vaccinate at higher rates than those who voted for other parties. Those who voted for Liberal or NDP in the 2019 election were most likely to indicate the intentions to vaccinate compared to those who voted for other parties. Alberta and Saskatchewan have the highest percentage of the population who do not intend to vaccinate. At the time, the federal Liberal Party, just so you know it, had no seats in either of the two prairie provinces, which simply means that Trudeau's calculus must have been, see, Alberta and Saskatchewan were write-offs anyways, and while he and his Liberals may not wind up with a majority government, they would get more votes than the NDP. And given how easy it would be to buy off Jagmeet, they could rule with a coalition government, effectively nullifying the Conservatives and any opposition. A subsequent Privy Council memo on August 19, 2021, titled Closing the Gap for Vaccine Hesitancy During the Last Mile of Vaccine Rollout, said there were pockets of vaccine hesitancy in parts of Canada that were traditionally conservative. There are pockets across the country of low vaccine uptake, including northern parts of British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan, rural southern Ontario, and southern Manitoba. Reasons for lower uptake in these regions are multifactorial and complex and include access issues, prevailing political ideologies, regional industry, demographics, and more, said the memo. In the 2021 election, the Liberal Party was returned to power with 32.6% of the popular vote, less than the 2019 election when it captured 33.4% of the same vote. The Conservatives got 33.7% of the popular vote, with the NDP coming in at 17.8%. The second memo noted that during the 2021 election campaign, Canada already had one of the highest rates of voluntary vaccination in the world, without mandatory policies. Canada is among the top countries in the world in terms of one-dose coverage, and we are quickly gaining around on two-dose coverage, it said. The government document suggested an estimated 72% of all Canadians had received at least one COVID shot, compared to other countries such as the United Kingdom, which was at 70% at the time, France coming in at 67%, Germany at 62%, and the United States at 59%. Which means that while the memo clearly confirms that both Liberal and NDP voters favored the vaccines, given at the time the uptake on the COVID vaccines was estimated at 72%, there must have had to been some Conservatives in the mix as well, who sided with their Liberal and NDP counterparts on the vaccination issue, which would explain why we not only heard so little pushback against the vaccines, mandates, and lockdowns by the Conservatives at the time, but why their near-deafening silence continues till this very day. Anyway, I do appreciate you watching. Thank you very much. If you have any comments, please post them. You can always follow me on my Rumble and my Locals account. Check out some of my past videos, and I will see you next time.